Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Debrief. I'm Emily Rao. Glad to have you with us today on the show. The government shutdown. Will it happen? And who's to blame if it does? Plus, the exclusive video. Take a look. The fiance of that missing mom in Colorado now in handcuffs. And a really cool behind-the-scenes look at just how TSA air traffic controllers manage all of those flights. We'll have those stories and much more coming up on the Debrief. But first, your headlines.
Pope Francis today is vowing that the Catholic Church will never again cover up sex abuse by priests. In his annual Christmas speech to Vatican staffers, the Pope also demanded that priests who have sexually assaulted children turn themselves in.
This morning, U.S. markets opened higher than expected following a week in which the Dow fell more than 1,000 points.
Today marks 30 years since the deadly passenger plane crashed Lockerbie, Scotland.
Pan Am Flight 103 was heading from London to New York when it exploded mid-air, crashing in the town of Lockerbie, Scotland. Investigators traced the bomb on board back to Libya. All 259 passengers and crew members died, most of them Americans. 35 on board, Syracuse University students. The campus is honoring students. Another ceremony is planned at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, where a mound of stones from Lockerbie stands in memory of the victims.
First up today, some breaking news out of Colorado. A big development here in the case of that missing mom who's been missing now for nearly a month. Police are now saying that they no longer believe that she is alive. And Clayton Sandell is following the story from Colorado. Clayton, thanks for being with us. They have now made an arrest of that woman's fiance.
That is right, Emily. It happened just after 7 a.m. this morning. This is the gate to Patrick Frazie's property. He is the fiance of Kelsey Barrett, who police say last saw her on Thanksgiving Day. At about 7 a.m., the agents from the FBI, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and local police showed up. They cut the lock on this gate. You can see the Teller County Sheriff vehicle here blocking the road that leads to Patrick Frazie's house. But I want to show you right over here. As everybody went up the road here, you can see this pickup truck that is parked on the road right up there. That is the car that Patrick Frazie was driving. So essentially, as police started to go in to serve this arrest warrant, he came down the road and they met head-to-head on the road. They ordered Patrick Frazie out of the car. His mother was actually driving a car behind him. They ordered her out of the car as well, temporarily put both of them in handcuffs. They later released his mother, but we could clearly see Patrick Frazie being put into handcuffs here. And so I want to just kind of step back a little bit and tell you again about how all this began. Kelsey Barrett, 29-year-old mother, was last seen in Woodland Park, Colorado, about a half an hour from here. She was engaged to Patrick Frazie. They did not live together. They had a 1-year-old daughter together. And she was last seen going into a supermarket that day with her daughter. Police say he was the last person to see her that day. Then there were these mysterious text messages from her phone a couple of days later on November 25th, where somebody texted from her phone that she was to her work, saying that she was going to be missing work all next week. And so that was the last sign. And police have focused on Patrick Frazie. In fact, a week ago today, they were here to serve a search warrant of his property. So they've been focusing on him, but it wasn't until today that they have finally made the arrest in this case. And sources tell us that they no longer believe that Kelsey Barrett is alive. We don't have a lot of details yet on how this crime occurred, how it all went down. We hope to get that later at a press conference. But one thing, the couple's daughter, Kaylee, who was last seen in that surveillance video at the supermarket, had been in the custody of her father. And last weekend, authorities said that They had no evidence to believe that Kaylee was in any danger by being with her father, Patrick Frazee. But we found out today that Kaylee is safe. She is in custody now, and she is safe. Now, Patrick Frazee, we have reached out to his attorney. We have not heard back. His attorney has told us that he has been cooperating with this investigation along the way, but clearly a major turn here. Now he is under arrest for her murder. Emily?
All right, Clayton, and to see that father's arrest there, the fiance's arrest there on the property, unbelievable. Our thanks to you, Clayton Sandell, reporting from Colorado. All right, moving on to some of the big stories out of Washington. There are several of them. And believe it or not, today happens to be the shortest day of the year. It's feeling, though, more like the longest day ever in Washington. We have this government shutdown that may or may not happen, and the blame game, the frustration, all of it in full swing. Let's start first with a reminder here of what President Trump said about a government shutdown just 10 days ago.
I am proud, and I'll tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut it down.
Okay, the president clearly saying, I will take the blame. But check this out, his most recent tweet. The Democrats now own the shutdown. Very short and sweet from the president there. A lot to get to. Of course, this is coming after yesterday when a short-term fix was possibly in the works. Karen Travers, we need your help on this to break it all down for us. Really now at this point, is there any hope of avoiding a shutdown?
Well, they'll say there's always hope. The president was meeting with Senate Republican leadership this morning to talk about a funding bill and to talk about border security. And when you talk to people on the Hill, they'll say, well, there's still time until midnight to see what rabbit they can pull out of a hat. But that was the least surprising plot twist there in this whole shutdown showdown. The president last week saying he would take the mantle on this. He would not blame Democrats. Well, of course, this morning, that's exactly what he's trying to do. But Emily, it's a tough spot to put Republican leaders on Capitol Hill in. When you had the president saying that last week, Democrats were giddy. They jumped on that. And now here we are with, hours left until that deadline. And everybody's trying to see if there is any wiggle room, if there's anything that can be agreed on to avert that partial shutdown.
And this is very messy political territory here, Karen. I know you spent the morning talking to radio stations across the country. I'm curious, what's the sense that you're getting from those different radio hosts and commentators about who they are blaming for this?
Now, Emily, this would be the third shutdown, if this happens tonight, the third shutdown of 2018. And the sense I was getting is that the attitude is very different than the shutdown that we had in January of this year, where people were very interested in the twists and turns and what was going to happen and worried about it. Now, the words I would use to describe the attitude was disgust, frustration, and a bit of apathy, too. It's December 21st. America, in a couple of hours, is going to check out for the holidays. Many people will be off next week and not paying attention to what is happening in Washington. So it's a shutdown that may not cause many ripples beyond the Beltway here, and people just maybe don't care. They also seem to think, based on who I was talking to today on radio and the questions I was getting from anchors, that this is just how Washington works now, and they're not happy with that. That it's the assumption of chaos, the assumption of everything getting to the brink. And an important point here is this didn't have to get to today. This all could have been resolved before. Nobody has budged on their positions on this, and everybody drew their lines in the sand several months ago. They punted on this until after the midterms, promised the president they would take it up, and now here we are with a couple hours to go, something that could have been resolved a long time ago.
And Karen, of course, those hundreds of thousands of people who may not get paychecks and will have their work lives, their personal lives in sort of upheaval as we go into this shutdown, they care about it. But what does happen next? I mean, do they leave until the new year? How will that all shake out?
Yeah, nobody knows what this town is going to look like tomorrow. We have heard from the White House that the president will stay in town if there is a shutdown. He was scheduled to go to Florida today, Emily. He's spending 2 weeks down there with family and friends for the holiday. clearly looking forward to a little bit of warm weather, some time on the golf course, but they say he'll stay. Now, the question is, who is going to be here in town for him to negotiate with? We've already seen many lawmakers leave town, heading out for their own holiday, very upset, some of them who had to come back for the potential votes today. But given how everybody has drawn their positions on this and really aren't budging, there's just not much to negotiate if they can't reach a deal over the next couple of hours. That's very different than what we saw in January. The government hit that point at midnight. The government shut down. Everybody was on the floor. There were still some frantic negotiations. And then everybody buckled down and worked Saturday and Sunday. Finally, everything wrapped up at the beginning of the week. I just don't think we're going to see that happening because, as we say, look at the calendar. It's Christmas coming up. People don't want to be in Washington for the next few days.
Karen, I cannot imagine those lawmakers spending Christmas on Capitol Hill. It just doesn't, I don't see that happening. All right, thank you very much to our Karen Travers at the White House. Some important context there. And once again, we have these major stories swirling at the same time. The government shutdown, but also news of a huge resignation. Secretary of Defense James Mattis announcing yesterday that he will retire at the end of February. And we have Martha Raddatz joining us from Washington on this. And Martha, important to point out here, first we have the major announcement about Syria, that the president wants to pull out the troops, and then just the very next day, this word from Mattis also pointing out in his resignation letter that it has to do with disagreements about foreign policy.
Clearly, he made himself so clear, Emily. This is no coincidence that Syria was one day and his resignation came the next day, or as Donald Trump called it, a retirement. What General Mattis, Secretary Mattis, did was outline in a letter the exact reasons he is leaving that post. He said, my views on treating allies with respect and also being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors. And he specifically mentions China and Russia are strongly held and informed by over 4 decades of immersion in these issues. We must do everything possible to advance an international order that is most conducive to our prosperity and values, and we are strengthened in this effort by the solidarity of our alliances. He ended that letter by saying, because you have the right to have a Secretary of Defense whose views are better aligned with yours on these and other subjects, I believe it is right for me to step down from my position.
Wow.
And Emily, I think this all started with the transgender troop announcement, the tweet that the president did that had nothing to do with what Mattis wanted. Then it went to the parade after that, the president calling for a military parade, which people in the military really, really didn't want. Certainly the senior officers have better things to do than plan a parade. And then you had the Space Force. And Mattis would go into these meetings with the president. He'd think they were all in sync on these things, and then appeared a tweet or something that had nothing to do with what Secretary Mattis thought they had agreed on. But I also am launched back to when this first started and how good Mattis was at working with President Trump and how much President Trump admired him. If you'll think back, it was even before he was in office, Secretary Mattis sat down with Trump and they talked about torture. And Trump later said, you know, he told me it's not such a good idea. You know, a beer and a cigarette or a cigarette will work much better than that. And I remember thinking at the time, boy, he's going to be very successful in this and working with the president. But I do think as the years went by, that President Trump just got more and more confident about his own abilities and was listening less and less to Secretary Mattis.
And Martha, your reporting and analysis on this story is so fascinating, but also sort of troubling on some level. Can you talk more about why a word of this resignation is so significant in comparison even to some of the others we've seen in recent weeks?
I actually think this is the most consequential resignation we have seen from the Trump administration because of who Jim Mattis is. 40 years of experience, 40 years as a Marine on battlefields. And when you think of a Marine, he had leadership positions all throughout his career. He had decision making. He knows these issues so well, and he is looked at as a real stabilizing force in the Pentagon, in national security. Our allies certainly have great respect for Jim Mattis, and Mattis himself, his own sense of duty. He is a man who is called a warrior monk. He never liked that Mad Dog Mattis moniker. He was called a warrior monk. He has devoted his life to service. So for him to step away, and in such a public way, and voicing his opinion, he is a completely non-political general. So for him to do this, for him to say that, for him to let the world know why he was leaving because he had a disagreement with the president, it is pretty epic.
Epic, a very good word to describe this whole situation, Martha. Okay, thank you. And one more question for you, because we also now have the president announcing a possible pullout, a reduction of troops in Afghanistan. What do we know about that?
I think what we'll see is that troops will be reduced by about half. It could be more. You just don't know with this president. We have 14,000 troops there now in train and assist mission. I think this will probably transition to more of a counterterrorism mission. It doesn't look like they're going to do this quite as rapidly, although some of our forces over there could start coming home in the next few weeks. I think they hope to have those 7,000 out by perhaps the end of spring. This has always been a controversial place, and there are lots of strong arguments for getting out of Afghanistan, because if you remember, we have been there since October 2001. It's the longest war we have ever been involved in. So there's lots of vigorous debate about that, but once again, that is not something that Secretary Mattis wanted to do, to pull out of there in any greater numbers. He wanted to make sure that al-Qaeda didn't return. There's certainly ISIS in Afghanistan as well, and the Taliban.
Just a few stories to watch there as we head into the holiday weekend. Our Martha Raddatz in Washington, thank you so much for joining us. Let's turn now to more on the weather that's impacting this weekend. Earlier this week, we told you about those tornadoes that touched down in Washington state. Well, now the state of Florida also dealing with bad storm damage that is moving on up into West Virginia, North Carolina, other parts of the country. Our Victor Oquendo is in Florida with more on some of that damage.
Emily, we are just south of Orlando. This house taking the brunt of one of the 3 tornadoes that touched down here in Florida. Part of the roof collapsing, that blue tarp now covering it. Inside, you can clearly see the damage through those blown out windows. And outside, there is debris everywhere. The wind's so strong, they blew this car right off the driveway. And now the storm is heading north. Overnight, this North Carolina highway underwater as the Lumber River spills its banks. In Virginia, holiday travelers pushing through blinding rain. That powerful storm that hammered so much of Florida marching along the East Coast. In Central Florida, 3 tornadoes, as I mentioned. In Manatee County, a confirmed EF0, one family having to hide in a bathroom. South of Orlando, where we are right here, one person was injured after another tornado tore through this home. Relentless rain falling 2 inches an hour in some spots, flooding roads in Tampa, winds bringing down power lines, 70 homes damaged at a mobile home community. In Fort Myers, 53-mile-per-hour winds ripping the roof off of another home. Now, this one that we're right in front of here in Lake Wales, well, this house has been deemed unsafe. Another family that is going to have to find somewhere else to stay during the holidays. Emily?
All right, thanks a lot, Victor Oquendo. The rain's still coming down in the Northeast. Let's get to Ginger Z with more on the forecast and when it might stop.
Emily, I wish I had a whiter Christmas forecast for you, but I have a very wet Christmas forecast for you, especially in the Northeast. As we end our weekend before everybody gets on the road and skies are into them, this is what we've been seeing. You can see the damage from EF0 tornadoes. 2 of them made their way through Central Florida. And not just the winds that came with that line, but really heavy rain. 3 to 4 inches of rain in Orlando area. That's a month's worth or more than a month's worth of rain in just one day. So that's the type of rain we're talking about. Flood watches in place from Virginia, North Carolina, right through New York and Pennsylvania into Maine. So up to 2+ inches left because it's already been raining, right? And so we just have a couple more inches left to go. But then it's the wind. It's not just the rain. The winds will gust in places like Rhode Island up to 65 miles per hour. In the southeast up to 40. As if the Pacific Northwest hasn't had enough issues, you see this. You've got the big waves in Washington State. You have the blowing winds of 50 to 70 miles per hour for a lot of people, the ferry trying to get across there. Up in the upper elevations, you had even gusts to 117. At least 300,000 people without power at one point. And the storms, not done. An onslaught of storms keep on coming, so that powerful river of moisture that's pooling into both Oregon and Washington State not going to stop. So through Monday, you could see another up to 3 inches and several feet of snow. By the way, everybody wants a white Christmas. Well, at least I can tell you it's winter officially. Yes, winter officially begins today at 5:23 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This point, one of the biggest travel days of the year is today. So many flights taking off, and the show must go on despite that weather forecast. So think about all of the thousands of TSA workers and air traffic controllers who have been prepping for this day for months now. Let's get to David Curley with a little behind-the-scenes look.
Hey, Emily, this is a rare privilege. This is the National Center for the FAA. Basically, they're looking at the entire national airspace on this day, the busiest day of this Christmas holiday travel season. Nearly 3 million flyers expected today. So let's give you a sense of what they do here. There are pods all around us for different jobs here at the command center. This is the watch officer. If there's a message to send out about what's going on at an airport someplace else, or an airline needs to know something, he's going to send the message. This is the operations control of the entire center right now. And you can see the big monitors give you a sense of what's going on. And already there are problems on this very busy day. If you look at the weather map, you can see that storm we've been talking about all week. It's over New York, and that is causing problems. Now we slide over to the other map, which shows all the aircraft that are in the air right now, and look where the concentration is. It's over the northeast. So you've got the weather and the number of flights, the heavy volume. That's caused some problems at LaGuardia and JFK already in the morning. The weather will continue for a while. So how do they deal with it all? Ginny Boyle is the manager here at the Ops Center. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. A lot of people don't get to see this. You basically are taking information from all the control centers around the country, the airlines, everywhere else, and your job is to keep us in the air, right?
That's exactly right. So we manage demand with capacity days like today during the holidays. We plan for this starting midsummer. This is like our Super Bowl. Lots of pre-planning going in, and we have plans ready for the day.
Now, the airlines told me that the rain is not a big problem. It's not snow. They're happy about that. But it does cause problems, and you have to deal with that.
Absolutely. Along with wind conditions, there can be a lot of variables with the weather. Weather's unpredictable, even though we try to work with that every single day, but we have all these playbook plans in place ready to take care of it.
And you want people to get home for the holidays.
Absolutely. It's very important to all of us. Lots of people sacrifice their time away from their families to make sure that you all can get to your families.
So we're out in kind of not rural, but pretty quiet Virginia.
Yes.
This is a big center. I don't think, this is a rare look for us. We don't usually get into a center like this, but this is key to keeping everything operating.
Right. We actually run the entire NAS. We manage
National Airspace.
Right, the National Airspace System. And we work with our airline partners, all the air traffic facilities in order to, have a safest, most efficient operation.
We hear the call going on with the airlines and everybody else. It's been a difficult start to the day. What does the rest of the day look like? You think you're going to be all right?
We're going to be all right. It's going to be a challenging day. We have all of our plans in place, but the weather, as we said, will be a little bit of a variable for us today, but we'll have all of our playbooks in place.
Janie, thanks very much. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Emily, this is really something you don't get to see very often, and these are the people behind the scenes that do keep the aircraft in the air. And it was interesting, we were listening to the call earlier and already hearing about those problems in New York, which with the weather looking the way it is, it looks like it's going to continue for a good part of the rest of the morning and daylight hours. So good luck to everybody trying to get home for the holidays as they fly. Emily?
David Curley, thanks. Great perspective to keep in mind if you find yourself waiting in line at the airport later on today. I'm going to remind myself of that as I head to LaGuardia. Okay, also something to be grateful for, the fact that you're not flying out of London's Gatwick airport. It is still a mess there after those mystery drones keep flying into the airfield. It is just causing quite the scene. Thousands of people grounded, and our James Longman has the story from London.
Hello, Emily from Gatwick Airport. You can see things are slightly back to normal. Unfortunately, I'm not going anywhere on my holidays, but people here seem to be both arriving and departing at last after really a pretty awful time for over 100,000 passengers who were stuck, unable to go anywhere because of the drone flying over the airfield. Yesterday, 760 flights had to be cancelled. Flights were getting rerouted to other airports in the UK, even places like Amsterdam and Paris. But luckily, it seems things are back to normal. But there must be some trepidation because they still haven't caught the people responsible for this. They still haven't been able to shoot that drone out of the sky. We've just been speaking to a spokesperson for the police who says if they do see the drone, they will shoot it out of the sky, but they haven't had the opportunity to do that. They feel that since the last time it was seen was at 10 p.m. local last night, that they feel that that's given the airport the kind of assurances they need to be able to operate. And who's behind all this? Well, I think probably it's anyone's guess at the moment. One of the lines of inquiry is that it's possibly an environmental activist. That's happened in the UK, that environmentalists have staged protests at different airports. So that could be one thing, but I think the sense we're getting from the police here is they really don't know, and they're appealing for the public to get in touch if they've got any ideas. Emily?
All right, thanks a lot, James. And that is going to do it for us for today's debrief. Want to remind you to join us for the briefing room. That's this afternoon at 3:30. So many big stories out of Washington to keep tabs on. World News Prime, of course, at 8 o'clock. And be sure to download the ABC News app. Thank you again for being with us. I'm Emily Rao. And for all of us here at ABC News Live, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.